Now this is my game against Zhang Pengxiang, a very strong, very experienced grandmaster from China. In this position, however, he is fighting with some difficulties. White has a strong passed pawn on d5, supported by the rooks. Knight on e3 is ideally placed, defending the pawn on d5 and ready to go to c4 at some point. And what is most important, the black's knight on b4 is completely cut off the battle because he has no squares. a6 is taken and he cannot get into game very easily. On the other hand, the game has a more or less closed character. It is not so easy to do something active, and it is very important that after d6, black knight will come to c6 and then go to d4, and this sort of activity should not be allowed. And now I was facing a difficult task of improving my position, but I also noted that my opponent can do pretty little, because although he would ideally like to transfer his knight to d6 to block my pawn, in this position, if he goes knight c8 at any moment, like for instance after king g2, knight c8, then d6 is almost decisive, because now I'm able to push my pawn to d7, and he will have it very he will have a very difficult task in front of him. So he, after king g2, that's why he tries waiting. He plays h5, bishop e2, g6, bishop b5. You see, white at the moment still doesn't see a plan, and played rook d6, bishop e2, rook d8. Now the thing is that at some point white would also like to be able to move his knight from e3, but it is also difficult because there is knight f5 always possible, and also it is interesting that the control of the square c6 is important, as well as f5. And then suddenly occurred to me that I could try a very interesting plan. I went bishop f3, king g7, and bishop e4. Now you see, it is not a very natural square for the bishop to be, but on the other hand, from e4 it has a very important function. It controls the pawn on d5, so that it is not hanging in many lines, sometimes preparing the move like knight c4. It is controlling the square f5, so that knight f5 is not a possibility, and it is controlling the square c6. So you see, now if black does nothing, next move I will go knight c4 and will proceed with increasing pressure on black's position. After this, d6 and b6 will be controlled, and I will be doing great. And it is also difficult to suggest any reasonable moves for black, because if he goes knight a6 trying to activate this knight, still after d6 he's paralyzed. So you see, after bishop e4, black has to try something, because otherwise white is just improving his position. Also, it should be noted that the move f5 after bishop f3 achieves little apart from simply weakening the pawn structure on the king side. So after bishop e4, my opponent played knight c8, trying to come to d6, and this was already a big achievement for white, because otherwise for a while nothing could be reached, and now black, facing the threat knight c4, was forced to give some ground and allow d6. So he went knight c8, I went d6, and then knight a7. Now it might look like not much has changed, but white won some time. Usually after d6, immediate knight c6 was possible with the threat of knight d4, and after d6 black immediately plays knight a7 with an idea to play knight c6. So in fact white won some time, and he uses this time in order to go d7 and then knight c6. Now okay, the pawn is on d7, very far advanced, but if black manages to play knight d4 without losing any material, then it will become unclear how to proceed further. It should also be noted that if just the black knight comes to d4, it will also be difficult to protect the pawn on d7. And so when going for this position, I already had to have some concrete continuation in mind. If you look at the position with some attention, you will notice that in fact black is blocking white's pawn at the very last possible square, d8, and also that the bishop on e4 is badly equipped to fight for the square d8. Basically cannot help now very much anymore, and that's why it is very useful to get rid of this bishop at the moment. So bishop takes c6, knight c6, and now rook d6. So now the knight is hanging, it goes naturally to d4, and I go knight c4. Now you see the pawns are collapsing, b6 is hanging, after which a5 will be hanging. And it is difficult to suggest what black should do, and the pawn on d7 is extremely dangerous. Black tries rook b7, knight b6, king f8, trying to bring his king closer, and white simply takes care of it by playing rook e1. Now the king will not come anywhere near. Black plays knight takes b3 and rook c6. You see that by using the strength of his passed pawn, white created the threat rook c8, which is not easy to deal with, especially because after, for instance, knight d4, rook c8, black has no moves, because all his moves meet a tactical refutation of some kind. That if he goes rook d7, and knight d7 is a check. If he goes rook b8 and rook takes b8, knight c8, followed by rook e8 is winning material. And if he is going after knight d4, rook c8, knight e6, and after rook e6 he is losing material. You see, whatever he does, there is some tactical trick which is not at all accidental. It is only it only stands for reason that with such a advanced pawn as I have on d7, there are always some tactical tricks available. So after king g7, black played rook e7, knight d4, rook c8, knight f5, rook f8, followed by rook g8. White pawn simply queens, and black resigned. So if we return to the beginning of this endgame a bit, we should like to see that although white had perfect control, it was still not so easy to improve the position drastically, and that white had to find ways of creating new problems for his opponents, and in this case the unusual bishop transfer to e4, creating the idea knight c4, proved decisive. Now you see bishop from e4 once again managed to defend the pawn on d5, control the square f5, and control the square c6. And you see that also in endgames, which look relatively simple, it is extremely important to be able to use all your pieces to their greatest effect. And here also this game is very illustrative, displaying the strengths of the far advanced passed pawn and all the tactical tricks which can be connected with such a pawn.